Hello, everyone. Uh, Something that was talked about a ton in comments, and I want to kind of break down a little bit and think about is the idea of shame, because I've been saying that the shaming isn't really working, and it's kind of a dead end, and then people have been saying various different things. Um, we need more shame in society. Shame held society together for like millennia. All these things that are mostly true, and that shame is a good thing, stuff like that. The I don't agree with most of those assessments. The problem is because of the way the world is gone and the moment we're in, you could say, shame is not going to work. To explain this, I'm going to talk a little bit about how shame works. If you just think through this is not from some book. I mean, what shame is that it's an appeal to compliance with an unspoken rule. Or maybe it's a spoken rule, but often it's an unspoken rule. So a society has a standard, right? It has a standard, for example, how women should dress, and then to shame is to say you're not abiding by the standard, right? You're not agreeing with the rules of the group. That's what shame appeals to. That's how shame operates. It accuses people of violating a norm, right? A standard. Now, something important to remember that's very relevant to the conversation that we're having is that a standard leads to shame working. That's the order. The standard allowing shame to exist. It is not such that shame creates a standard, right? You can't shame a standard into existence. If we all started randomly, well, it wouldn't be everyone. If some random people started saying, it's embarrassing to eat rice or something. Like it wouldn't work. Everyone would laugh at you, right? Because what happens is the standard actually comes first. All right. So why is this not working? Why is shaming not working? Because we have no standard. We have to understand that that is the moment we're in. We're post-standard. We don't have something we can call back to. There's no common religion, like we have a really vague common Christianity, but our Christianity is like nice, like is fundamentally concerned with niceness and being unoffensive. So there's no way that we can appeal to, like if you think of the way buildings are made, they're made to look like they're not from a certain school of architecture. They're made to look schoolless, standardless, just a box. This is everywhere. We don't want to seem anything particular. Everything is general. The only standard is to have no standard. Not only that, the second thing is even if we did have a standard, one of like the core tenets of our culture is to worship the rebel. So the existence of a standard wouldn't even help us at the moment we're in because we love the rebel. We love the one who breaks the rules. And we've loved this, arguably, ever since the boomer. And the boomer is interesting to think of in this context because it's probably your grandparents who would normally do a lot of the shaming. That generation, right? The third generation. The one that's next to die, that has done the most things, that's retired, that has grandkids. That's the generation of the sexual revolution. So, shame in a healthy, normal society is a great idea, but that's not what we're in. We are in a qualitatively different moment. Like, this is not a moment we've been in history before. With, like, porn, with the like material prosperity, but spiritual deadness. We're not in a moment where just shame harder is going to work at all. Things are qualitatively different. So, if we've totally lost that behind, what might actually work? Well, I think we have to look to the example of Rome. Like pre-Christian Rome. So say Rome in 100 to 200 AD. If we think about helping the poor is a very Christian idea, and it's not a pagan idea. It's a Christian one. That's why I'm using this example. So if you were a Christian in early Rome, and you started trying to shame other Romans who were not Christians but were pagans, you tried to start shaming them into helping the poor, it wouldn't work and they would laugh at you. Or they would think you were crazy because you don't have a common standard with these people. That's what we're dealing with, right? So if you're a Christian in early Rome and you don't just want to help the poor yourself, but you want to encourage society to help the poor, what are you going to do? I think there's two things. You have to live it. You have to genuinely live this. You have to, I mean, in this context, you have to be a person who tries to live in a, like, a pure and upright way. So this is the whole problem of, like, guys watching porn and then shaming promiscuous women. You cannot do that. That will not work. Like, I think that you have to call to things that people who are not in your framework will still understand, right? Because there's some mystery in, if you had never thought that the poor should be helped, you'd see someone help the poor and it would kind of throw you off. And it might stick in your mind, right? It might kind of become a little like a stumbling stone for you. And you're like, why did that guy give money to a poor beggar? Like, that beggar should have just died. But sort of almost the travesty of the act will stand out to you. So in the same way, if you really live it, if you genuinely abide by your principles, not in a shaming way, but in as being a symbol of a different way, eventually that gets noticed simply because it's so abnormal. And you can also have, I think, I really want something like an artistic renewal. I really think a lot in terms of images, and like the image of someone helping the poor, the image of the image of the virtuous woman. If we don't have that in our art or our music or anything, then I think in our, like, collective kind of cultural mind, it's absent. So because we don't have it in our fiction, we don't have the possibility of it. Since fiction, a lot of what fiction is doing is talking about what's possible. If our fiction isn't opening our mind to the possibility of virtue, then we won't be thinking of virtue in the same way. The other thing that I think would actually work is to quit moralizing so much. Because, once again, this is about the appeal to a common standard. If the secular religion does not teach that sleeping around is bad, and the secular religion is the big religion, is the kind of the pseudo-Christian, like the Christian-flavored secular religion. It doesn't, freedom is the virtue in that religion. So do whatever you want. And also, it's virtuous to be a rebel. So if you have to think of a different way to approach how to encourage people to not be promiscuous, right? And there are ways to do this that kind of step outside of, that appeal to things other than your moral sensibilities. Like, if you appeal to someone's desire to actually fall in love, and you say, look, like sex creates like a spiritual bond, which a lot of people, even, a lot of vague spiritual people, that's a ton of people, will agree with, and you say, like, it's this spiritual bond that kind of ties your soul to someone else, and people will still be tracking, and then you're like, okay, and then, like, isn't it best to have that with the same person for your whole life? Isn't that the most romantic image? Isn't the most beautiful image you could think of to grow old and ugly with someone else? And a lot of people will track with you there. And once you're at that point, like, marriage is a deal that you're going to be exclusive. That's what a marriage is. That's not the only thing a marriage is, but at a really basic level, that's kind of that's what's going on when people marry. I think you also have to have actual compassion here. Like, and I saw some people in comments talking about, one guy talked about how it was hard for him to feel bad for promiscuous women because he was not an attractive man himself. I haven't thought a lot about this, I'm kind of just bringing it up now. Okay. I've noticed something about virtue in that, like, okay, first off, physically unattractive people are real. That's not, it's, people are lying when they act like there's no such thing as being ugly. That's not true. But actual virtue there's a way that it shines brighter coming from an unattractive person than from an attractive person. So if you are unattractive, you can take solace in that, you know, like the pretty person being attractive is like, that's one thing. But the pretty person, goodness, the pretty person being virtuous is one thing, and that's glorious and awesome, you know. But to have the strength to not be attractive and in spite of that be virtuous has like a qualitatively different kind of brightness to it that is, I think, something that people who are in that situation should pursue. And like one of the virtues is to be compassionate. So if you are concerned about growing and kind of ascending as a human, as an ugly person, like eventually you'll have to get to the point where you're like, yeah, there's all these girls and they're maybe attractive and promiscuous, but I still do feel bad for them. This is like a Disney movie type lesson, but if you haven't learned to, maybe like old good Disney, but if you haven't learned to pity people you disagree with, it's like you're still not quite healed, right? If there's people you're mad at and you don't at all, there's no understanding for you, you just are mad at them, you just shame them, you just can't stand them, and you couldn't, like there's no way in which you could pity them. You haven't healed. You have to get to the point where you can pity someone who hurt you, I think. And that's everything.